So this knife is almost too big to fit on camera, which is hilarious. Um, but this is a knife that I picked up while we were on our little trip in Virginia here recently, Norfolk and Virginia Beach. I think this was in Virginia Beach, this antique mall. But I noticed this in the one case, and it wasn't sitting like this, obviously, because nothing ever is. But I saw this part of the handle, and I'm like, that's a Coke bottle. So I had the lady pull it out of the case for me. And I pulled it out and I looked at it. It has, ebony wood handles, steel bolster and cap and everything. Um, and it's stamped Robeson cutlery. And when I saw the blade, the shape that the blade was in, I almost said I didn't want it, but it was $25. I pulled it out and I was like, you know what, I'll take it. So I now have this large Coke bottle that's a really nice version of an older Coke bottle and everything. And I think this is like huge. Let's see here. So this is more than 5 inches closed. So this is a huge Coke bottle knife. Um, but this is an example of a knife that has been taken care of and sharpened correctly over the years and everything. I'll assume that somebody carried this for a very long time and sharpened this on a stone and everything because that's what it looks like. And the funny thing is, like, running my fingernail down this edge, this is sharper than some knives that people carry around. Like, this is still a pretty sharp knife. I could still cut things with this. So that's, pretty cool. Once again, the match strike nail nick here, just like on that Booth Brothers knife that I showed. Good action and everything, which is cool. Does have a slight amount of blade play, but I mean, any of these older knives kind of excuse that because that's just something that happens over time. It's got this cool shield here. This would have been a good shield for putting your like name on it or something. If you had wanted to, the ebony handles are in good shape. Down here, they're a little beat up, but there's no cracks or anything in them, as far as I can tell. Don't think that's a crack. I think that's a scratch in the wood, which is interesting. This may not actually be ebony, because ebony doesn't usually scratch up and stuff. It could just be a darker, like it could have darkened over time and everything. I may slightly clean this one up, but I certainly won't do much to it because I like the fact that it, looks old because it is old. Um, but this will be another knife, just like my Booth Brothers knife here, which I've done a video on. You can look for that video. Then I want to get like a jewelry case or something, like one of those glass cases, and just put this in there to like display. Because this one's not ever going to get carried or used or anything. This is just a cool old knife that I bought because it was a cool old knife. Um, and I like the Coke bottle pattern, the large Coke bottle. Um, Something about it, I just really like it. Or the mid swell hunter, because it's actually a pattern that's been around longer than Coke. So we call them Coke bottles today, but back then they didn't call them that. And I forget when this knife was produced. I think it was produced somewhere. If I remember correctly, I think it was like 1917 to 1939. So it was produced in that period in between World War One and World War Two, and around the time of like the Great Depression, or possibly before that, which is interesting. Um, but yeah, not quite as old as I ideally would want it to be. But once again, another very old knife that could possibly be 100 years old. The tricky thing about tang stamps back in the day, obviously, today a lot of these companies change their tang stamp every year, so it's really easy to date it. But back in the day, I mean, you just changed your tang stamp when your like your stamping die wore out. So, I mean, they use this tang stamp for 20 plus years, 22 years, something like that. Um, because back in the day, it didn't matter how old your knife was. You bought a pocket knife to use it as a tool, and then you threw it away when you were done with it. And that's just what you did. There weren't really, I assume anyway, that there weren't really knife collectors back then because, once again, back in the day, especially during the Great Depression, you just had something like this, and this was your knife. So you know, took care of it, you sharpened it, and you kept it around because this was your knife, your only knife probably. Um, and you know, it was just your knife, and you weren't collecting them or anything because they were cool. You were just buying it because you needed to have a pocket knife to cut things with. Um, but it is interesting seeing such a large knife that somebody carried back then, because a lot of the times it seems like they're always like smaller knives. Whereas today, I feel like it's more normal to carry a big knife. Um, but yeah, this is just a really cool old Coke bottle. Um, yeah. So anyway, that's gonna be it for this video on this Robeson Coke bottle knife. Um, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.